In the north, in the space between the dimensions of the world, there was a mystical warrior by the name of Strong Wind. Strong Wind lived with his sister on the side of a great lake. Strong Wind was invisible. He could only be seen in the movement of the clouds, the waving of the branches of the trees, the rustling of their leaves, the waving of the grass. Strong Wind was invisible. One day he said to his sister, "I'm lonely and I would like to find a wife. What qualities should I look for in my seeking?" And his sister said, "You should seek truthfulness." So Strong Wind thought for a moment, and then he said, "We will test these maidens to see if they can see me." And his sister said, "But you cannot be seen." And Strong Wind said, "We are not testing what they can see. We are testing their truthfulness." So Strong Wind's sister went out and about and broadcast abroad that her brother was seeking a suitable wife. And many maidens came to see if they could be the bride of Strong Wind, this great warrior. And Strong Wind would come from behind the hills, and the clouds would move and the branches would wave, and the sister would ask the maiden, "Can you see my brother?" And they would look and look. And then one amongst them would say, "Yes, I see him, I see him." And the sister would say, "With what is his bow made?" And the maiden would speak up and say, "It's made of rawhide." And the others would say, "Yes, yes, yes, it's made of rawhide." And the sister would know that they were not speaking truth. So there were many, many maidens who came and were discarded as possible brides. Strong Wind began to believe that he'd never find a suitable bride. But in the meantime, there was an old brave in the Indian tribe that lived nearby, whose wife had died many years before, leaving him with 3 daughters. They were all beautiful, but the third was not only physically beautiful, but she also had the endearing qualities of being kind and gracious, and she was loved by all, which made her elder sisters very jealous. Now the jealousy was such that one day, when the father was away, the elder sisters tore the garments of their younger sister. And when the father came home and said, "Daughter, what has happened?" before she could speak to explain, the 2 elder daughters said, "Look how stupid our sister is. She can't even take care of her clothing." On another occasion, when the father was away, the two elder sisters said to the younger, "Let us comb your hair." But instead of combing her hair, they took a knife and cut off her braids. And when the father came home, the father said, "What has happened to you?" And before she could explain, the two elder sisters said, "Our sister is so stupid. She even cut her own hair." And again, some time later, when the father was yet again away hunting, and the younger sister was tending the fire, the two elder sisters pushed her face in the coals. She was burned. When the father came home, greatly shocked, before she could explain what happened, the elder sister, you see, our sister can't be trusted to do anything. She even falls in the fire. Father was greatly concerned and removed the ashes and the remainders of the charcoal from the daughter's face, but she was scarred. Her gracious and kindly nature remained, but she was no longer considered beautiful. There came a time when the elder sisters were of marriageable age, and they too sought to become the bride of Strong Wind. So they went to Strong Wind's sister, and again they were tested and found lacking, even though they said and purported to be able to see Strong Wind. They were rejected, as were all the others. And then the youngest daughter came to marriageable age. She took her torn gown and sewed it, covering it with shells to make it beautiful. And even though her sisters laughed at her and said Strong Wind would not want to marry an ugly being, she set out to where the sister of Strong Wind lived. All the members of the tribe wished her well. And when she arrived, the sister of Strong Wind, calling her brother, who came around the bend, the clouds moved, trees, branches waved, the leaves rustled. And the sister said, "Do you see my brother?" Youngest looked, scowling. She said, "I see nothing." Strong Wind's sister said again, "Do you see him?" And a look of wonder and awe came over the youngest's face. "I see him. He is marvelous," she said. Youngest sister said, "With what is his bow strung?" "Oh," said the youngest sister, "it is a rainbow." Just then, the sister of the wind said, On what is he riding his sled? The youngest said, he's riding on the Milky Way. And Strong Wind's sister knew that Strong Wind because of the younger sister's truthfulness had shown himself to her. Arrangements were made. The youngest daughter was dressed in a beautiful white deerskin gown and seated at the marriage table. Strong Wind appeared in his human form, a tall, handsome, brave, seating himself on the other side of the table. The marriage vows were made, and they were wed. The youngest sister was now the bride of Strong Wind, and the elder sisters were greatly jealous. They were determined to be rid of her. So one day, when she was leaning over the oven, they came up behind her with the intent of pushing her into the oven, which they would close and dispose of her. But Strong Wind was in the area at the time and knew their intent. He immediately turned them into aspen trees. And this is why aspen trees, even before the wind reaches their branches, begin to quiver and quake. The questions that arise out of this story are, what is the main character in this tale? What does this character represent as an aspect of our self? And why? What is the main character of this story? The wind, the maiden, sister, and why? What is the aspect of ourself that stands out in this story? Right. So relating that to yourself, why? What is it in you that doesn't waver?